Hello everybody, welcome to Kriya Yoga Online. I'm Ryan Kurczak, the author of A Course in Tranquility, Kriya Yoga teacher and Vedic astrologer. I've gotten numerous questions sent to me over the last month or so, specifically dealing with the topic of anxiety and dealing with anxiety. So I thought that might be something useful to discuss in regards to yogic meditation practices, meditation in general. Meditation is an excellent tool for working with anxiety or depression or other moderate emotional disturbances. But what we have to remember is that, just as I've said in many of the Kriya Yoga courses and other meditation courses, that yoga itself, meditation practice itself, the point of it is not to cure your psychological problems. The point of it is not to make you a happier person, although that is a side effect that occurs through yogic meditation. Yoga and yogic meditation itself, the point of that whole process is to allow you to experience what you are. Some people refer to that as spiritual enlightenment or self-realization, self-actualization. But it's about learning who you are and gaining wisdom about what you are in relationship to the wholeness of life, in relationship to the rest of you. And I consider pretty much the environment, the world, the people that you interact with, all an aspect of this one whole undivided consciousness. So first of all, we need to understand that yoga and meditation, first and foremost, that is the real essence, the real goal of what we're aiming for, to realize that. And this is why when it comes to practicing yogic meditation, it's important to have dealt with our emotional and psychological issues first and foremost. We'll talk more about that a little bit later on in this video, but for now, let's just talk about how basic meditation procedures can assist you in resolving, recognizing anxiety, worry, things that get in the way of being able to appreciate the life around you and what you are. Well, anxiety itself, from a yogic perspective, stems from undigested experiences. These can be traumas. These can be things that occur because of violence that you've experienced, or accidents, or serious illness, anything that has occurred in your life that is extremely disturbing, even the death of a loved one or the death of a family member. Anything you have not been able to process that has left you feeling wounded or hurt or scared or alone. And to work through these kinds of issues, if they are severe enough, it does require the help of a psychological professional. Now, in my past experience, my undergraduate is in psychology. That's about as far as I go with that, so you can take my opinion for what it's worth knowing that. But I have participated and studied various forms of alternative healing that deal with calming the mind. And I found that while talk therapy is very good and very helpful to help get things out in the open, to hash out and figure out where might these issues be coming from, where might these difficulties be coming from, really, I think it requires a form of body work, whether that be somatic experiencing, that's an excellent system to explore, or craniosacral therapy, or I've heard of body talk therapy, any kind of gestalt therapy, which allows you to tune into the body, to feel the body. Because all of these things that create anxiety in your life, or tension, or stress, they are all stored within your body, whether that's your physical body or your energetic body. And that's why you can be having a perfectly fine day, and then all of a sudden you experience depression or grief or sudden stress or fear, because something is triggered within you that is reminding you, more than likely, of something in the past or some kind of subconscious issue that you've not resolved. So the beauty of meditation is that while you are engaged with a professional to work through these issues, the beauty of meditation is that it can allow you to open up and create space to acknowledge and to process many of these difficulties. So imagine for a moment that you have eaten something that's turned your stomach sour, or you've eaten some bad food. Now, let's imagine that you think the cure for that is eating more food. And it turns out you just eat more bad food. And this cycle keeps repeating itself. So eventually, you're just in a state of indigestion all the time. And what meditation does is once you've eaten something that has turned your stomach sour, you're taking a break, you're giving yourself the capacity to rest, and letting your body take care of it, letting your body process whatever it was that you'd ingested. The same is true for emotional experiences. Oftentimes when we experience grief, again, the loss of a loved one or a traumatic event, what's our typical response? Well, it's to do something to take our mind off of it. It's to do something mindless to kind of push it away. And that can be helpful in the very, very beginning, maybe, if it's something so traumatic that you just can't accept it. But in the long run, we do have to eventually turn around and look at what it was that was troubling us. And this can take a while. So usually when people get involved in meditation or yogic procedures, they don't think that they're doing a very good job, because what's happening, their mind starts thinking. They start remembering all these things. They can't stop. And they say, well, meditation is supposed to make me more calm. But all that's happening is I'm starting to get a little more agitated, or my mind is going crazy. When really what's happening there is what's supposed to happen. You're taking a break. You're pausing. You're bringing presence to your experience, to your body, to your mind. And now that innate intelligence within you is saying, well, let's process all of this. And so it'll start bringing things to the surface. So we have to remember, when it comes to our meditation practice, when we first begin meditation, it may seem like we're not making progress because our mind is going crazy or we're experiencing emotions. But really, that's what's supposed to happen. As long as you can stay alert and watchful, observing what's happening, without getting pulled into it, without overthinking it, without overanalyzing it, just letting it process, letting it percolate up and resolve itself. So anywhere you put your attention, the body, the mind, the consciousness will start to develop equilibrium again. And if you've not taken time to look at or experience past issues, subconscious fears, that's when it's going to come up. So we have to remember, with meditation, with yogic procedures, while it's best to have dealt with these things before you begin, because again, the purpose of our yoga practice is not to heal ourselves, it's to realize what we are. In the beginning, there may be this rush of issues arising in your mind, fears, anxieties, depression, memories, whatever it might be. But again, that's perfectly normal. That's part of the process. So how do we engage this? Well, you find yourself a meditation technique, a very simple, basic meditation technique. And on this channel, the Kriya Yoga Online channel, there are some guided meditations. And particularly if you go to the playlist for Learn Kriya Yoga, specifically the video on preliminary Kriya Yoga practices, you will find numerous meditation techniques such as Sushumna breathing or chanting through the chakras, which allow you to experience a centered, calm state. And what do you do if you're experiencing anxiety or fears? Well, you practice these meditation techniques until you feel as centered as you can be, meaning you're able to sit still, you're able to be watchful, and to pay attention. Once you go through the process, whatever technique you choose, even if it's just a simple mantra technique, then you wait and you watch. And it's helpful to keep your attention here, the forehead or the spiritual eye center, or here at the heart. Just pick one and stick with it. And you sit and you breathe. And you watch the thoughts that arise. You acknowledge the anxiety or the fear or the depression or whatever it might be that is there. And you continue to breathe. And you don't overthink about it. You don't try to push it away. You don't try to engage it in any particular fashion. You're just observing it. And I always like to use the example of when you're a scientist and you're looking through a microscope. You might have a virus down there on that slide, but you're not getting affected by it because you're looking through a microscope and it's under the slide. The same thing is true here. Your consciousness is observing what's going on within your nervous system, what's going on within your body, what's going on within your subconscious. And that light of awareness, that capacity to see, if you can keep breathing and just let those memories, emotions, thoughts roll out, eventually they'll run out. And then you'll experience a thought-free, clear state, which is what most people consider to be the ideal with meditation, yogic meditation. So it does take part of the process is learning to let yourself internally unwind, to acknowledge that you have experienced traumas, that you do have fears, that you do have unresolved survival energies within you, that you're holding tension within your body because you haven't been able to accept or deal with certain situations within your life. But by observing them, you're making space to allow them to be digested so that you can move on with your life in a state of peace and a state of clarity. Now again, this type of process are for things that you can handle. Meaning, if you have chronic anxiety, but it's not overwhelming you, it's not getting in the way of your work or your family or interactions, but you know it's there, then you can follow this process. But if you have severe anxiety or severe fears or severe psychological problems, you do need to speak with a professional and then use meditation as a supplemental tool. So hopefully working with someone who knows the process of meditation or knows the mechanics of how meditation works, that can be very helpful. So keep all of this in mind. Essentially what's happening is you are looking back through previous experiences that still bother you, that you have ignored, that you have pushed away. And you're learning to accept them and digest them. And what we have to remember is that in this life, we are not going to escape from a loved one dying. We are not going to escape from illness. We are not going to escape from people letting us down. There may be situations where we are where we are traumatized, or where we have been traumatized, where we didn't have control. Those things happen. That's part of existing in this world. Now, the better choices we make and the clearer we get, the less likely that is to occur. But most of us have been in an unconscious state for a long time, which means that we don't really choose the people we hang around consciously. We tend to identify with our consistent emotional states, fear, anxiety, anger, whatever it might be. And so in that case, we start to see and attract more of those. But the more we are able to develop our consciousness, develop our awareness, we can start to recognize when we're in a situation that might contribute to trauma or difficulty. And we can decide, do we want to continue to participate in this? Or do we want to remove ourselves from it and experience something different? And that's part of the yogic process. That's part of how to lessen anxiety in your life. So it's not just about sitting with the issue and digesting it. It's also about making choices that lessen the capacity to experience difficulty, traumatic difficulty within the life. Now again, some things we cannot avoid, such as illness or the loss of a loved one. But one of the things that we'll learn as we mature and get older and meditate and engage our spiritual practice is that death and change is a necessary aspect of life for our own evolution, for our own maturity. And the more we run away from it, the more we ignore our grief, the worse off we are. Grieving is perfectly natural. Crying your eyeballs out because of something horrible that happens, perfectly natural. And denying that, that's where we start to get issues locked up within our body. And we all process and move through these issues at a different speed, meaning that someone might be able to experience a difficulty or a loss within their life, and they grieve, and they feel it, and they process it, and they can move on within a month or 2 months. Some people, it might take a little bit longer, but the whole issue is learning to sit with it, be with it, let it be a part of your life. Because to push away grief, to push away things that trouble you, things you can't help, that is. That is ignoring and not honoring what it means to be a human being within this world, within this natural world. So we have to see that as not something we run from, but something we learn to embrace. And at least in our culture, the Western culture here in the US, when it comes to death or loss, we have a tendency to just want to skirt over it and not honor it, not acknowledge it, not look at it. And so therefore we don't understand it. And it may be that if you have issues that revolve around loss and you have that feeling of why, why did this have to happen? Well, if you are on a meditation path or a yogic path, that is a very valid question to take into your meditation, because we have to remember that we are part of a whole divine consciousness, a whole one consciousness, and you can call it divine if you want, that's just a term that I use. There's an intelligence there. And we cannot always understand why things happen. But we can take our questions into meditation, our questions about why, what's the point, what's really going on here, and ask those questions and wait for a response. And this is one way to develop wisdom and clarity and peace, because in time, the more you ask sincerely, not just to throw up your arms and be morose and dramatic, but to really want to know, why is there this suffering in the world? Because it's going to be there, so there's no use ignoring it or thinking that one day everything's going to be perfect in this earth plane. But really ask, why is there this suffering in the world? And sit with it. In time, you will develop an inner peace, because that intelligence will impart itself to you, that knowledge will arise, that you will understand why there is suffering in the world, to help you be more humble, to help you see that things are temporal, that things are always changing, to direct your attention within to a deeper faith, rather than trying to define yourself through happiness in an external phenomenon, an external world, this person making you happy, this much money making you happy, this item making you happy. These changes, these loss, this grief allows you to go within, and which is why a lot of people become very spiritual when they experience great loss, because they start to see the temporal nature, the change within the world, and they realize they cannot build their happiness or their peace on that. They have to find it within themselves. So meditation can be very helpful in many ways. Number one, to give you the capacity to sit with, process, and digest any unresolved fears, traumas, anxieties, experiences. Again, not to engage it, not to look for more, because some people do that, especially within the spiritual communities and New Age communities. They're always looking for the next thing to transform, and this isn't about looking for the next thing to transform. That's a very distracting state of mind to be in. It's about dealing with what is actually there rather than looking for something else. So you just observe what arises, you breathe until it finally empties itself out, and you experience that state of peace. And it will happen, but each of us are different. Each of us have a different karmic load or a different amount of baggage that we carry around. But you have to sit, breathe, and be with yourself and your body until the twitches stop, until the distractions stop, until the emotions clear themselves out, until the memories quit replaying themselves. But eventually they do. And then you experience that deeper peace. Also, secondly, once you experience that state of clarity and you have these questions about life, about why there is suffering or why these horrible things have happened, whatever it might be, you have to ask the questions. Really ask, why did this happen? What was the point of all this? And mean it. Not in an angry way, not, shaking your fist at God and saying, why did this have to happen? But in a humble way, sincerely asking, why? Why did this have to happen? And you wait for the answer. You wait for that knowledge or that realization to be imparted to you. So that's also part of the meditation process. So consider this whenever you are meditating, if you have fears or anxieties that you're working through, it's a perfectly natural part of life to have them. So that's not that big of a deal. It's the fact that we have them and we don't want them is what makes it a problem, or the fact that they persist. And why do they persist? Because we want to try to get rid of them all the time instead of sitting with them and being with them. But anyway, we don't want to sit with the fear too long. We want to see what it's about, process and digest what is causing it, and then exist in that state of clarity that occurs after the processing. But if you have, again, serious psychological issues or emotional traumas that you can't handle on your own, you need to speak with a professional about that and then engage meditation or then engage yoga practice. A very excellent self-directed method that you can use, there's a book which you've probably heard me talk about before called The Presence Process by Michael Brown. That's probably one of the most well-written, well put together programs that can really pave the way for a successful meditation routine, yogic meditation routine, as well as helping a person experience, digest, and process their anxiety, the causes of their anxiety from a causal level, not putting a Band-Aid over it with medication, not putting a Band-Aid over it by trying to talk about it all the time, but by actually really getting to the root cause of what is this about and then letting it go and moving on. And that's a very key point. If you overly identify with your anxiety, if you get attention because of your anxiety, you're less likely to be able to resolve it through meditation or this book, The Presence Process by Michael Brown. And you might want to ask yourself that question. Do I get attention because of this anxiety or this fear or this emotional difficulty I have? And you may, and that's, again, perfectly fine. Everyone needs to get attention somehow. And that might just be how you were trained from an early age to feel that you have value or that you're worthy by having someone take care of you or acknowledge you or pay attention to your issues. But as I always like to say to many of my friends, is that I am a good friend for someone who does not need a good friend. And, a discussion I had with a friend of mine yesterday when this came up, I was asked, well, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, if you're overly needy, if you're always going over the same issue again and again, if you're not looking at it and moving on, I'm probably not going to be a good friend to you. Not because I don't see any, not because I don't have compassion, but because if you keep making the same mistakes over and over, if you keep choosing the experiences or the thoughts that cause anxiety, and you're not actually actively looking for an efficient way to move through it, that just tells me that you're more interested in having someone put a Band-Aid on your wound all the time versus letting that wound heal. So keep this in mind. It's an interesting process. It's a very subtle process. It may require the help of someone else, but meditation can be very good to work through and resolve these difficulties. But you have to be consistent with it on a daily basis until eventually the disturbance resolves itself. And that might take a while, months, even years for some things. I don't like to think of that as having to take that long. If it's that kind of an issue, again, professional help might be in line there. Again, somatic experiencing, a person who does somatic experiencing, craniosacral therapy, any kind of body work that addresses these issues, or a psychologist that knows about these things. Even emotional freedom technique can be a very good process for certain things. Not all, but for various issues, people get a lot of relief. And you might find that after you work through these difficulties, that you actually have more energy. Your health is better. Aches and pains within your body actually go away. You're more optimistic. You're able to experience the world with a new set of eyes. Again, why is that? Because you're not using all of your energy to hold in traumas. You're not using all your energy to suppress subconscious issues you've not dealt with. And then you can really live your life, what I would consider to be in an authentic way. Okay, so if you want some more guidance on meditation, please review this channel, Kriya Yoga Online, so youtube.com, Kriya Yoga Online. You can subscribe for future videos. I may do another video on depression, considering depression. But see the playlist, Learn Kriya Yoga on this channel, and particularly find the video that deals with preliminary Kriya Yoga practices. Those will be some excellent meditation techniques to get you engaged in the process. And also consider the book, The Presence Process by Michael Brown. Read that book, apply it, follow the 10-week course. I think it's a wonderful tool. So be well. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll be in touch soon.